Hello, everyone. I was doing research for a different project that I was going to be doing, and I found the book that I was looking for, which was this book. It's The Cool Girl's Guide to Knitting by Nikki Trench. I was going to do one of her patterns. I was going to adapt one of her patterns for a different video. But the thing about this book is that I've probably had it for about a decade or so. And it's more than just a knitting book. She also writes about like the history of knitting, and she also talks about the different materials, different types of yarn. And Nikki Trench has a somewhat snarky style to her, and she also has like lists throughout the back. But on the very last page before she goes to like the addresses, and before the index, she has this list called 20 mistakes every knitter should make. So I just thought it would be fun if I just went through the 20 mistakes and find out which ones I've actually done and to give you something to laugh about, I guess. So here it goes, 20 mistakes that every knitter should make. Number 1, knit one sleeve longer than the other. I'm sure I've done this. I can't remember which project I've done it to because, come on, I've probably knitted over 1,000 things by now. It's hard to keep it all track. Not everything gets remembered, unfortunately. But in addition to like the sleeves, like it also happens with like the front of sweaters when you like make a top part of the garment and it splits down the middle. If you don't keep track, it can be very easy to accidentally make them different lengths. So mistake number 2, you must drop a stitch so it runs down. You must drop a stitch so that it runs the whole way down your garment, which inevitably starts to unravel. I have done that. I used to have a knitting machine. It was this horribly cheap piece of plastic, and it didn't catch on one of the hooks, and it unraveled the whole way down the tube. That piece got frogged. That piece did not get finished. However, if I'm dropping a stitch in a project, often what happens is it doesn't always run the whole way down. Sometimes I'll knit it so tight that it literally, like, there's no room for it to ravel up. You just got like this little loop on the back, and that often ends up getting frogged too, because that annoys the heck out of me. All right. So mistake number 3, knit the neck so tight that you can't get it over your head. I don't think I've ever knit a garment too tight like that. It's happened when I was painting. So I bought a white t-shirt to recreate a shirt I had when I was 3, so I could do one of those pictures of like, this is a picture of me when I was 3, and here I am at 28 recreating the same picture. And I put fabric paint on the collar, and that made it really hard to get it over my head. But when it comes to actually knitting, I don't think I've made that mistake. Often because if I'm making something for myself, I'll try on before I like continue knitting with it. So I don't usually have it so tight. Number 4, knit the neck so loose that it shows your cleavage. Not the neck, but the whole garment in general. Yes, I've done this many times. Like, I've attempted to adapt projects that are meant for little kids for my size, and then they end up being too big. Or I end up trying to like go by sight and then it goes too long. And then suddenly it's for someone 3 sizes bigger than I am. I've actually filmed a video where, like, I made a hat that was too big for me. And I took it out because it would have been annoying. So mistake number 5. Knit something so itchy that is never worn or means your boyfriend won't give you a hug because you're too itchy. A real passion killer. That's why I don't typically wear wool. Or typically don't use wool, because there's this psychological thing in my mind where, like, even if it's not actually itchy, I will think the wool is too itchy. So I tend to go for like acrylics or cotton when I'm knitting. I have knitted things too itchy that I will refuse to wear them when they're done. I haven't had the romantic part of that yet, though. Simply because I don't think I've ever been around a partner and worn a knitted object. Have I? Yeah, I don't think I've ever worn... No, I have. But when I did, it was cotton. And it wasn't itchy. Okay. So 6. Knit something fabulous and never sew it up. Throw it in the attic and don't see it for 20 years, by which time it'll be moth-eaten and home to refugee rats with a family of 56 aunts and uncles. Trying to think. Like, I will put off sewing things. I will absolutely put off sewing things, but I don't know if I've never gotten... Oh, I do have something like that right now, actually. It is not moth-eaten. I have never experienced moths, knock on wood, that I never do experience moths. And it also hasn't been 20 years because I haven't been knitting for 20 years. I've been knitting for very close to 20 years, but not for 20 years. I have a tank top that I was knitting when I had COVID. And I haven't sewn it together because I have to take part of it apart because it doesn't quite line up. And if I were to sew it as is, it would be annoying. It would like stick out to me and then I wouldn't I wouldn't desire to wear it, which is always a really sucky feeling when you knit something and then you try it on and it's like, this doesn't look as good as I thought it would. Anyway, if I do ever get around to like finishing it, it's gonna look freaking amazing. And while it's not like moth-eaten, it is pretty dusty. It's been on the floor of my bedroom for close to 2 years at this point. I mean, I got COVID towards the end of April, beginning of May 2020. And it is currently March of 2022. So mistake number 7. Don't count your stitches so that instead of having straight lines, your scarf looks like an hourglass stitched together. I don't think I've done that while knitting. Or at least not done that continually. I've absolutely done that during crocheting. Because with crocheting, it's a lot harder to tell where the stitch ends, like where the row ends. So it doesn't affect me as much now because a lot of my crochet now with making stuffed animals is in the round. So I'm just continuing. The one row bleeds into another. But if I'm like crocheting a flat square, I definitely have to be cognizant of where the row ends. I'll often leave a stitch marker there so that way I know. So I don't have the hourglass effect. There was one time when I was first starting to knit where I did get it wrong. Or maybe that was crochet too. No, I think that was knitting. And I ended, like, I kept decreasing without realizing it. And I ended up with a triangle. I just found myself with one stitch at the end. It's like, how did this happen? I figured that one out pretty quickly. Number 8. Offered to knit a new boyfriend a woolly sweater. Then he'll be scared off and run a mile because of too much commitment on your part. I have never made that offer to any partner. I have tried to surprise a partner with a sweater, but then we broke up before I ever finished it. Actually, it wasn't a sweater. It was a kimono. Because I thought like the kimono would get rid of the boyfriend's sweater curse. And no, it doesn't. It still applies when you're making a kimono. No, the most I've ever given a romantic partner, knitted wise, was a very, very small stuffed animal. I don't think I've ever really been with anyone long enough to make a garment like that. Can't say anything about the future though. Number 9. Try to adapt something your knitting experience isn't ready for. Always follow the instructions. They are there for help. I do this all the time. All the time. Usually it's so I have lots of patterns that are meant for little kids, but I am not the size of a little kid. So I will often attempt to increase the pattern size, only to find out my increases got too much. There's also the time I messed up short rows. And let's talk about all those years I spent thinking that I did not know how to purl. But in reality, I was purling and calling it knitting. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I probably attempted a pattern during that time that I could not do. Although when I was younger, I was much more of a process knitter when I was younger than I am now. Now I do knit more for the product. But when I was younger, I would just cast on stitches on the needle just for the sake of knitting, honestly. It's like, what are you making, Becky? I don't know. It's going to tell me. And that's how I ended up with one sock. Or one mitten. Or this oddly shaped square. We don't know what it's meant to be. Is it supposed to be a towel? Is it supposed to be part of a blanket? We don't know. There was also the time I attempted to knit a rug, but for some reason I only cast on 5 stitches, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to sew it together. And then it turned out ugly, so I just cut it into little squares. Yeah. Things are much better now that I follow patterns. So number 10, sew the wrong side to the right side. So you have the inside sleeve attached to the outside back. I don't remember any specific instance in which I've done it, but I'm sure I've done it. Again, I've knitted over 1,000 projects at this point, so it's absolutely possible. Usually I'm more careful than that, though. Number 11. Start knitting something for someone's baby. Take 18 years and give it to them just as they are about to leave home for college. I haven't made this mistake yet simply because I've only been knitting for 18 years and I have not worked on a single project for that entire time. Also, when I knit for babies, I tend to make stuff that I don't have to worry about how big the baby is. I try to make unless the parents are particularly adamant, like, we're having a little boy or we're having a little girl, I will usually attempt to make something gender neutral. because you don't know what gender the baby's going to be. And also, I try not to make a specific piece of clothing because, I mean, you don't know what size the baby's going to come out. If they're a preemie, they're going to be super small, or maybe they're going to be some 10-pound monster, and if you knit something super small, they might never fit it. So when I knit things for babies that I give to other people, I tend to make blankets or stuffed animals, because you don't have to worry about gauge, and the parent will still be able to find a use for it regardless of how big the baby ends up being or what gender the baby ends up being as well. I don't care what gender you are. You're probably gonna find in some sort of animal appealing. Like, I could knit you a crocodile and you'd still, like, it'd still be cool. So mistake number 12. Wash your garment, then promptly shrink it after spending 10 years making it. I have not made this mistake yet, simply because this mistake requires me using wool. And for reasons I've mentioned before, I don't typically use wool. I typically use like acrylic or cotton, which don't tend to shrink in that way. 13. Knit a sweater for a relative as a gift without measuring them. Uncle Charlie always wanted a knitted dress. The aforementioned kimono, I did not measure the yarn. I did not take care of gauge. And well, I don't think I have that kimono anymore. But it would have fit a sumo wrestler. Let's put it that way. And the person I was making it for was as skinny as a stick. I mean, kimonos don't have to be form-fitting. But, yeah. I have also knitted a sweater without measuring the person, but nowadays, if I'm knitting someone a garment, I will try to get their sizes, so I can be like somewhere in the ballpark. Like, a little bit loose is not bad. Having it so tight it doesn't fit them, not so good. 14. Knit your partner a reindeer or snowman sweater for Christmas. I have not made this mistake because I've never had a partner for that long period of time. Also, I've never made a reindeer or snowman sweater. I'm not sure I've seen the appeal of having a purposely ugly sweater. I mean, if you have an ugly piece of clothing, why would you want to wear it? I've never quite understood that concept. I mean, maybe someone could explain to me. I'd be happy if someone would explain the concept of ugly sweaters to me. Especially since a lot of the sweaters that get promoted as ugly sweaters aren't actually ugly. It kind of defeats the purpose if they're not actually ugly. Mistake number 15. Let your cat sleep on your lap while knitting. Then when it gets up, find cat dribble all over your cashmere masterpiece. This mistake has never happened to me because I've never had a cat. Growing up, my sister was allergic to everything except food, so all the pets we've ever had were aquatic or robotic. And I can tell you, robotic pets are boring. Because I'm about to show my age here. I had the Techno dog and the Techno kitty. And when you turn off the Techno robots, they forget everything you ever teach them. They had instructions for how to train them to teach tricks. But if you turn the robot off, because they would just make noises periodically, they would forget everything you ever taught them, and you'd have to go through the whole process all over again. It's like, press this button for 4 seconds, then press it twice really quickly, then press it for 4 seconds again. And I did not have the patience for that. So you just turn it on, and like they just like go around, and yeah. There was a time during a hurricane evacuation where there was a cat in my room, and I missed it because that was the week I went off to college for the very first time. Yeah, I moved into my college dorm freshman year in the middle of a hurricane. That was fun. Yeah. I've got a feeling I'm probably going to experience that mistake someday, because someday I would like to have a cat. I just know I'm not in the position to have a cat at the moment. Mistake number 16. Knit fair aisle and get the paddle totally muddled up so your garment looks like the sea of mango color or Joseph's Technicolor raincoat. Probably the closest I've gotten to this mistake was making argyle socks. So my very first time making argyle socks, I decided not to strand the color along. I just cut it, so I wasn't wasting yarn. And then if I didn't weave the ends in, like there were some parts in the rows where you only needed the color for 2 stitches. So the stitches were falling out. And like the back looked like a mess, and so they wouldn't fall out. I kind of had to knot them in the back, and it looked really terrible. I'm not against knitting like argyle socks again. I just know I gotta strand the color in the back and risk catching them on things, and yeah. Trying to think. Usually I'm more careful though. Like if I'm going to take the time to like do a fair aisle thing, I will have a graph of the pattern, and I will have a ruler, and I will follow it up. Mistake number 17. Go to knit nights every Monday and undo your knitting more than you actually knit. So I'm actually quite lucky. When I go to my knit nights, I actually knit with something else going on in the background most of the time. So being around a group of ladies while knitting isn't a distraction for me whatsoever. Like I do know I need certain types of patterns in order to go to knit night. Like I can't bring something overly complicated because part of the fun is talking with other knitters and like the camaraderie. Like I can knit all the time. I don't need a particular time of the week. But I bring projects that are the right level of difficulty, so that way I don't get terribly distracted. This absolutely applies to another lady in the knitting group, but as she puts it, I don't come here to knit anyways. So, mistake number 18. Knit your stitches so tight that you can't get them off the needle. I have absolutely done this. Especially when I was like first starting to knit and I hadn't figured out the tension yet. And oh boy, when that yarn squeals, it is terrible. It is like one of the most horrible sounds on earth. It is not the most horrible sound on earth. There are other sounds that definitely are closer to it, but that squealing sound of when the yarn is too tight and it's like you're pulling it, and it's like in the same category of like squeaking chalk. Number 19, knit a bikini and swim in it. Knitting swimming trunks is definitely not a mistake. I'll give you a laugh. I have knit a bikini. I have not swum in it. Because when I put on the bikini, I looked like I belonged in a Nicki Minaj video. That was the only good part. It was terrible, the bikini. I didn't it made my butt look good. That was the only part. It was way too revealing for me to even show another human being how it looked. I wouldn't be opposed to making that pattern again. I wouldn't be opposed to making a bikini again. Although I do have a different bikini pattern that if I wanted to swim in the bikini, I would swim in that instead. It'd be more of a tube top thing. I don't think I still have that bikini. Yeah. At the time that I made it, and with the type of yarn I used straight up cotton yarn. It had no elasticity whatsoever. So it wasn't like gripping my body correctly. Yeah, it definitely wasn't even secure enough for me even to consider swimming in the bikini. And the last mistake is number 20. Show your mother your knitting. She'll be of the old school of the 70s and 80s feminists and will think you've let the team down. So in my case, this actually isn't a mistake. Like, I show my mom my knitting all the time and she loves it. Even though my mom is a feminist, like, her feminism includes knitting. Unlike the jibe that this book is taking, that women of that time period think knitting is not a feminist activity. So there we have it. Those are the 20 mistakes every knitter should make. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've only committed like 10 of them? Not bad. It's like a 1 in 2 chance I created the mistake. I feel like the time periods of this is kind of weird too, because this book is... The vibe of the book seems like it's being aimed towards 20-somethings, but then it gives time periods of decades. So it seems like the mistakes are things that knitters in like their 50s should... It's like the list is made towards knitters in their 50s in a way. I mean, quite honestly, I do fully expect to be knitting when I am 50. I expect to be knitting pretty much for the rest of my life. Arthritis notwithstanding. Like, I feel like the only reason I would absolutely stop knitting is there would be something that would happen to my hands that would physically make it impossible to knit. Yeah, those are... That was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.